Do you know the number of cryptocurrencies currently on Coinbase? Do you know that number?
It's over 100, but it depends. It depends what jurisdiction you're in, and are you an institution versus retail? Like, there's so many different categories now.
But
Even
over
like
100.
yeah.
So what does it take to become become an asset, to become a cryptocurrency on Coinbase, to add your technology to Coinbase?
Okay, well, so we're trying to get away from this idea of being listed on Coinbase as being seen as like an endorsement or something, because I actually think it's very important that we are not considered judge and jury about, like imagine it was the early days of the internet and you were like, what's a good web page and what's a bad web page? Like you would have been totally wrong. Or anytime big tech companies try to make these review boards of like, Apple famously gets in trouble for this a lot with their App Store review process, right? And so something that you think like a committee of people somewhere thinks looks silly may turn out to be the next big thing, right? And so it's very difficult. So what do? I mean, we basically have a test of legality, right? We check, do we believe this is a security? If so, it can't be listed on Coinbase, and there's a very rigorous process we go through for that. Just currently, the way the laws are in the U.S., you can't do that, and we acquired a broker-dealer license from the SEC. We're trying to work with them to get that operational, and hopefully someday we can trade real crypto securities. But today, that's not possible in the U.S. at least. Then we look at sort of the cybersecurity of the crypto asset. Do we think there's some flaw in the smart contract, or a way that somebody could manipulate it without the customer's permission? We look at some compliance pieces to it as well, like the actors behind it, and like their any kind of criminal history, anything like that. But if we believe it meets our listing standards, basically this test of legality and everything for customer protection, then we want to list it, because we want the market to at that point decide. And it's kind of like Amazon or something like that, where a product might have 3 stars or it might have 5 stars, but if it starts to get 1 star consistently, like it's probably fraudulent or it's defective or something, like maybe Amazon will remove it. But otherwise, you want to let the market decide what these things are. So that's generally how we do it. And by the way, more and more of these assets, I think especially like low market cap assets, are going to be traded on DEXs through Coinbase. It's not that we don't need to list every asset on a centralized exchange. I think DEXs are really good for the long tail. And then it becomes it's even more clear to people, like this is not some endorsement by Coinbase of like, this asset's good and this one's bad. Like, my belief is there's going to be millions of these assets over time. And so I hope it doesn't like make news every time we add one in the future, basically.
Yeah, I wonder how you get there, because I look to Coinbase for example, people, as you could imagine, sort of tag me on Twitter or something like that, and all that. Like, you should interview our sort of the founder of this particular coin, right?
Yeah.
And it's so hard for me to know first of all, what's the interesting technology, what's who's a scammer or not, who's actually legitimately representing an ambitious new thing versus a scam.
Yeah.
And there's very few sources of like verification signal. And unfortunately, Coinbase in part has become a little bit of that too. And you're trying to get away from that, because you're trying to get as many, sort of let the people decide. So you're thinking of like Amazon star type system where the people could rate.
Yeah. So I think we'll actually probably add like user ratings and reviews. So, and we'll be very cautious about like, these are real people. There's a bunch of stuff we have to do for that already. So I think wisdom of the crowds is good in terms of getting feedback on items. But we're going to do our own review, which I mentioned earlier, right? Which is like, okay, it meets this minimum bar to be listed on our site.
Yeah.
So I think, both are important.
How do you know if a coin is a scam or not?
Well, you can see a few things. So, I hate to use the word scam, because a lot of these are judgment calls. You got to a court may or a jury may land either way. But things that would be red flags to look at would be, is a bunch of the asset owned by an insider or insiders with short vesting periods. are does the background of the founders, like they may have criminal records or if they've perpetrated other frauds in the past, right? There's a difference between something which is just a Me Too product that's like doesn't have anything interesting about it, and something that's an actual fraud or outright scam. And you have to, a lot of this data, what's cool about it is that it's now available on chain. You can look at like the tokenomics behind it and see who owns
Tokenomics,
it. And are they, and are they selling it, in like inappropriately, or are they pumping it on like YouTube and Twitter and making promises about, hey, the value of this thing may be higher in the future. And like all those are just big no-nos that we would, we just don't want to go there. So our whole thing is like, we want to enable innovation in this space, but not allow anybody to curtail the advancement of this industry by like doing some kind of fraudulent thing or get rich quick thing. So
it's a tricky industry because I'm trying to figure out who to, what's interesting to understand, to research.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know. Let me ask you about a tricky one to add to a centralized exchange, which is privacy preserving cryptocurrency. So like Monero.
Yeah.
Is that technically difficult, or is that why is like Monero, for example, forget that specific one, but like privacy preserving cryptocurrency blockchains, why is that ever possible to add?
So that's a great question. So the answer is maybe. So here's the reason why. So because we're a regulated financial service business, we have various licenses to do that. We are regulated by various regulators. Part of those licenses requires us to have a, quote, reasonable program to monitor for suspicious activity, an AML program, anti-money laundering, right? And so if a coin is 100% anonymous and we can't really do blockchain analytics to track source of funds and where these things might be going, it makes it harder to have a reasonable program around that's defensible. Now, there are privacy preserving coins like Zcash, which have something called a view key. And a view key is basically another key which allows you to de-anonymize the transactions in specific situations where you want that. So for instance, we do support Zcash. And one of the ways we got comfortable with that is that when you're buying it on Coinbase, you can basically have a view key. The transactions are not anonymous while you're buying it, and we can see where it goes afterwards and do our whole standard program. Now, if it gets a few hops away down the road, I mean, people could eventually turn on privacy preserving aspects. So, these are tough judgment calls, but at least in terms of our interaction with the customer and everything, we feel comfortable at that. I think there's a broader point here, which is that I actually think privacy coins are a good thing for the world, and they should be allowed. And more like, despite we've made this judgment call to operate in a regulated and safe and compliant way, but just taking my Coinbase hat off for a minute, I think the world would be a better place if there were more privacy coins, because it's kind of like the internet when it first came online. Like there was no HTTPS, everything was HTTP, and there was, so people were afraid to put their credit cards on the internet, and your messages could be intercepted and all this stuff. And now the whole internet has basically moved to HTTPS with the little lock icon in your browser, which is better. Like, and financial information is like the most important information to keep private, right? So there's times where, like, let's say you're running a charity or something and you want to have total auditability, transparency for the whole world, who donated and where did the money go. That's great. You want it to be public. But if it's like your personal money or something like that, you don't want to be broadcasting that to the whole world. And in some ways, that's what blockchains are doing, pseudonymously, because but it is a public ledger. And so if you can know who owns each address, you can basically de-anonymize it. I think basically the people should fight for privacy and freedoms of all kind, but privacy of money is a good thing.